Welcome back, everybody, to the ABCs of Inspired Teaching. My name is Kyle Krieger. Thrilled to be joined this morning by my guy, Wilkie V. Law III. Will, what is happening?
It's cold in Houston, but again, that's relative to the people that you're talking with. For Houstonians, it's 27 degrees right now. Where I'm at, wind chill is 16, so it's cold for me. But I'm enjoying the time. We had a non-snow day yesterday, so got to spend the day sitting on the couch, vegging out, doing absolutely nothing but watching shows with my wife and my daughter. So that was
What did
amazing.
y'all choose to watch? I never asked you that
We
yesterday.
watched Raising Dion. Raising Dion. It's based off of a comic book about a little boy who gets superpowers,
Mm.
and it's a really great show. We watched season one like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and they just dropped seasons two on Netflix. So I have to say, if you're into the superhero type of jazz, it is a great storyline, and the little character that's in it is amazing. The kid who plays Dion. Um, yeah, you'll see a lot of familiarities with students in your classroom. I mean, that's how I see it, and I can't really turn that teacher brain off. So,
Yeah, I know. We are super pumped to have a friend that we were just talking about how long it's been, but our friend from the Teach Better team, Ray Hughart, is with us on the podcast for the first time in forever. So, Ray, thanks for being here. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Oh, I so appreciate the invite back. I was such a fan of you guys. This was such a good treat.
Yeah, it's so funny because I I still listen and watch and follow all the stuff that you do, and I was thinking because we had kind of over the last couple years gotten a little bit sidetracked with the podcast in terms of like scheduling people and getting people on, and when we were talking at the end of 21, we're like, who do we want to have on? And we're like, well, we could just like cycle back to the OGs at least to start.
I love
So
it. Anytime you're able to bring people back years later, it's different conversations, different
yeah.
passions, different hurdles. I'm
mhm.
totally game for doing this all again. I'm so excited to chat with you guys.
All right. Well, for maybe the four people in education who might not know who you are, could you give us a little bit of your background and what you currently do now in the education space?
Of course, yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ray Hughart. I'm currently the CXO of the Teach Better team. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit that is called the AMES Association. And I also have a background in middle level education. I've taught at the university level. I have had a whirlwind of the past few years, like we all have. And I always love being able to kind of surround myself with different opportunities to see education through different lenses, through different perspectives. And I can't complain. It's a really wonderful gig I have now to be able to work with teachers day in, day out and actually get my feet on the ground and see that impact. It's powerful.
Okay, so you said the nonprofit you're a director for is called what?
It's called AMES. So it stands for the Association of Illinois Middle Grade Schools. And I've actually sat on the board for AMES for the last 5 years and just recently took on a little bit more of an official role as the executive director. Essentially, it's an Illinois nonprofit that supports middle school educators, whether it be administrators or teachers. So it's kind of fun. I have this weird opportunity to like walk into every middle school across the state, which is a new opportunity for me. So I'm feel like I'm networking like crazy and I'm really getting to learn about Illinois specific concerns. Whereas obviously in Teach Better, we're a global community. So I get to focus on a different lens as I'm working with educators from all different states and countries and everything in between.
Mm. How do you feel like it's been trying to keep the balance between you or between those two? Because I see what you post all the time, and I'm like, I don't understand how you can do multiple jobs with all of the recording and the posting and all of that stuff that you're doing.
No, I mean, I love Teach Better. Teach Better is my passion. There's no job better than that. It really was, as many educators know, we have the luxury of having so much power in our classrooms of controlling the narrative. Or at least in some regard, we have a lot of choice in our job. I feel very similarly about Teach Better. I really got to craft what that role looked like. I got to take my favorite pieces of education and really make that my focus. And it also gives me a lot of variety. I host a morning daily show every day for educators to tune into or catch after the fact. I get to work in a lot of different facilitation roles, but the AMES organization really was in a different phase of life, phase of growth. It's been around for almost 100 years, but it also is still working to kind of enter into supporting a 21st century classroom, which I felt like I had a relatively good knowledge base to be able to support that in. So I really like it because it's similar work, but in very different phases of life. The things I'm getting to do right now with the AMES organization is really more similar to what I was doing with Teach Better 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
Interesting. That's fantastic.
That is super interesting. Like I that in and of itself to be around for 100 years is just mind blowing. I'm new to the middle school space. I've only been in now for 5 years, 4 years actually, and that we don't have that type of support here in Texas.
Mm.
I can imagine, I can see a lot of teachers benefiting from having a space like that where you get that sense of networking on a non-official administrative type of, networking where you can actually really have those real conversations and see change. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's
That's awesome.
interesting, AMES really is trying to find its space in a 21st century middle school classrooms world right now, whether it be supporting the teacher or the students or the administrators. But, it's kind of the like our parent company for AMES is AMLE, which is obviously a national middle school support system that supports everyone across the US. And I think they're actually expanding into Canada as well. So I apologize, I'm ignorant to that. But it's always nice to be a part of an organization that's dedicated to networking, regardless of what network you choose to walk into. And then it's also really nice when that network can have perspective not only at a state level but at a national or global level to really ensure that everything that you're discussing in those networking opportunities are well rounded and are really supportive of all types of people. So it's been a blessing. I hope to continue it for another few years, and then I really hope, whether I stay in this position or just go back to the board, it really is a middle school support system that I'd love to always be a part of.
I guess on a question that's kind of related to where we've been the last couple of years, did AIM how did they kind of fall when it came to COVID? Like, because it seemed, at least where I am, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that there was very little room to be apolitical on it.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is, how did that organization kind of navigate this time when there's so many conflicting opinions, and then maybe how did the organization try to support teachers through what's been a crazy couple of years?
Yeah, no, it's a huge question. I think everyone's still trying to answer that. But AIMS being at a state level, especially in Illinois, for those of you who are familiar with Illinois politics over the last few years, the governor's been making a lot of decisions, which has then allowed AIMS as a nonprofit of the state to have a very specific direction of support that it's able to provide. So, in some regard, AIMS has just continued to be a space to support administrators more than anything else during COVID, really discern what laws and responsibilities they need to be focusing on, and really foster a collaborative space where administrators from around the Chicagoland area or across the state can actually share resources and ideas. Whereas Teach Better, being more of a global organization, has been really able to funnel and fuel very different types of conversations between teachers and administrators, because we host an administrator mastermind every Tuesday. It meets in the morning and in the afternoon, just depending on what time works best for administrators. And we get people from all different backgrounds with all different perspectives and all different opinions on that topic. And so Teach Better has actually been a space to bring in multiple perspectives, problem solve, share resources, obviously connect those dots for people. So it's really been nice to be a part of two different organizations that have the opportunity to serve in two different ways. Kind of fun. I was in the classroom last year. So I also, throughout the first few years of COVID, was able to have kind of like my feet on the ground working with my middle school students. This is the first year now that I have fully been transitioned to being a support for education in a different space, as of this past year. So it's been very interesting being able to support classroom teachers and support administrators in all different facets, and also be able to kind of have the perspective when speaking to a teacher, when working with the teacher on something to say, hey, last year I was there with you. When we all shut down March of 2020, I too had that exact same
Mhm.
experience. And this is kind of the things that began, and these are how the conversations have gone since. So I'm really valuing hopefully bringing in, different ideas, different perspectives, and also some genuine brainstorming opportunities for the people I get to hang out with every day.
But it's almost like for you, one hand feeds the other really, really well. Like that's a really good sweet spot as I'm looking at it, because one of the biggest challenges is bringing what you know that is research based or that is globally being accepted as something that is working, and making that transition to the local, because there's so much time between what we know research says and what we actually do in practice. Like it's not fluid yet. But I can say, like, I know for me, like I always try to bring research methods when we do our collaborative planning. And I'll bring in and say, guys, this is what the research is saying. How can we adapt this to our specific population? But I know a lot of districts and a lot of campuses are not having those type of conversations because it's teach, 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 teach. When sometimes you need to let kids breathe.
Yeah.
They call me the hippie teacher, because SEL has always been my thing. And so now that it's being more of a focus, it's like for me, it's just what I do.
Hmm.
It's not an extra thing that I do. It's just what I do. And so sometimes it's good just to, as teachers, to remember that just breathe, take time to build yourself up, to know what's going on in your world and make those decisions that are best for you.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important as educators are moving forward, whether they are a classroom teacher at a first grade level or a high school history teacher or a middle school math teacher. We all are in a space to make big decisions, big instructional decisions, big social and emotional decisions in our classroom. For me, my focus always, and I think this is just because everybody has their passion space, right? So I can't do it alone. I need my community to come together and do this alongside me. But for me, it's all about trying to find a way to make it sustainable and scalable. Educators right now are feeling like their checklists and to-do lists are so long. They feel like they're wearing 1,000 hats. They feel like they don't have enough hours in the day. And you know what? They're right in how they feel. Like they feel like they're being put, things are being put on them that aren't their responsibility. They're right. That is happening. So for me, it's less about, this is the right answer or this is the model that's going to fix everything, but it's about identifying one of the problems that they are most eager to solve. And then how can we solve it in a way that isn't just a really quick fix or pulling an idea out of a hat, but how can we actually create something in the classroom that's sustainable and scalable so it's not a problem in the future as we pick another problem to go approach and solve. So I love being able to be a part of the of hopefully educators lives of that is more focused on problem solving and really solution seeking, not just for today but for the long term, so we can kind of make some progress here.
I'm gonna ask the cynical question
Do
because
it.
I'm sure people listening and even myself have that thought in their mind. Well, if I gave my administrator a solution, they aren't gonna implement it anyway, or whatever variation you would want to take of that. So my question is, when you, like you said, you're uniquely positioned because you have your hand in both places. Do you feel like it's tough to communicate the feelings of a teacher to the administrators you talk to and vice versa? Because I'm sure a teacher could never understand what an administrator is going through, especially over the last 2 years.
Mhm.
And it feels like, from a teacher's perspective, that administrators have lost touch of where teachers are really at. So how do you work on that particular part of trying to open the line of communication between those two groups?
This is actually an issue that I feel very close to over the last 3 months. So I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to speak out of turn here. But I love this question because this is really a huge amount of what I've been working on the last few months, because this is what the community is talking about. right? Teachers, when I'm meeting with them, want to talk about how they feel misunderstood by leadership all the time. And leadership, as I'm meeting with them, wants to talk about how teachers are just not understanding what they're asking them to do. And it is just a never-ending circle. It feels like we're on a mouse trap, right? Where we're just going and going. Um, I am struggling with this because I think everyone in a space of crisis wants to find a bad guy. We want to find a person to blame.
Mm.
And as an educator, I used to blame and did blame my administrator all the time for stuff. Um, I think as I've learned more about leadership, I'm learning that administrators have very, very little power. And I gave them all the power. They were the holders of all things good and all things bad. And they were worthy of not only carrying the crown of being the face of the building, but they also were worthy of all the garbage that came with that when stuff came down the pipeline. And I have learned a great deal. I have had to apologize a great deal as I've learned that administrators, at least at the administrator level that we're talking about, principals, assistant principals, even directors in some regard, coaches in some regard, have exceptionally limited power and are truly the messengers in so many decisions. I don't actually think there are many things that they get to make decisions on that teachers choose to blame them for. On the flip side, I think leaders have an exceptional ability to forget what it's like to be a teacher. And as we transition into leadership, they believe that teachers should be treated differently than students. And the reality is that as you become a school building leader, the only thing that changes in your role is that your teachers are now your audience rather than having 11-year-olds as your audience. And so I spend countless hours talking to administrators about what they would expect in a classroom to be done when this type of message, when a message needs to be communicated, and really pushing back and wondering why that isn't the same expectation for an administrator as they're leading a professional development meeting on a Monday morning. So I think that to me there's this misunderstanding of the two groups, but they're easy to pit against each other. There are a lot of people making decisions that aren't in those two groups, and I'd rather have teachers and leadership come together to really foster the right solution, rather than being frustrated with each other because they're fighting with two groups that aren't actually the problem creators. There's a chapter in a book that I published in 2020 that says, teachers deserve respect and teachers deserve good leadership. And the whole book is all about what teachers deserve. But those two things specifically, the one about respect emphasizes the fact that teachers do deserve respect. But the first moment to be able to get what we deserve is teachers informing people about why they deserve respect. Because unfortunately, it isn't just an inherent belief that teachers deserve respect. It's teachers' role to say, I'm educated. It's a teacher's role to say, I have my master's degree. I've studied this. I know the research. I do 180 hours of professional development every 3 years to keep my license. And the first thing that needs to happen is teachers advocating for themselves. And I think it'll be easier to advocate for themselves when they see that the people that are around them aren't all against them. There's just a few people who don't understand the perspective. So I went down a rabbit hole there. I apologize, but it's a great question.
No, you really helped because I'm over here taking notes because I'm in that kind of crazy crossroads right now where I'm considering throwing my name in a hat. Well, I've thrown my name in a hat for an administrative position after 15 years in the classroom.
Killer.
And I fought it. And Kyle knows since we've met, I've told him that's one thing I never wanted to be. But having to serve kind of in small capacities to help out on my campus because we're short an administrator, I've seen the impact that I could have. And it wasn't because it's not like because I'm frustrated to be in the classroom. Like I love the classroom is my jam. Like that's my space. I love teaching kids. And I think that's my hard part is what you said is about realizing that now my students are not the 11 and 12-year-old, students that's coming in. They're the 28 to 30 to 23 to 40-year-old teachers that now I have to engage in the exact same way that I engaged my classroom.
Yeah, the positive phone calls home, the building relationship with stakeholders, the ability to lesson plan and provide a hook, and then you need to summative and formatively evaluate. This is the same practices that we need to do with our educators.
And it goes back to what they say a principal is. A principal is the chief leader, the executive leader in a campus. And if the principal is not setting that example to where I walk into a meeting and you see an agenda and you see a well thought out lesson plan the exact same way that we're expecting to see when we walk into a classroom, then it kind of throws teachers off because now why am I going to hear what you're saying when you're not doing what you're telling me to do?
Well, and to be honest, the things that are lacking, and I'm generalizing, but the skills that are lacking in teachers, like I don't believe teachers understand their worth like they should. I don't think teachers advocate for themselves like they should. I don't think teachers understand the game sometimes of business like I think that they should. I think those same weaknesses are in our leadership in most cases. I think leaders don't advocate for themselves like they should. I don't think leaders understand. So I really want to see these groups come together because we have more similarities than differences, and we're all in the trenches under the same building. And I really don't mean to like burst anyone's bubble, and I'm not saying it's a black and white system, but the principal that you are mad at is not making the decisions that you think they are. We had a snow day here. I'm in Illinois, in the Chicagoland area, got a boatload of snow Tuesday night. And I have to tell you, every school in the entire state was closed except for like four. And the four weren't like all grouped together in the top half of Illinois and didn't get snow. It was just districts in random spots across the state that said, nah, we know we have 15 inches of snow, but let's still go in and have a great day. And I was talking to teachers on after Wednesday, and they were mad. And I talked to a principal on Thursday. He was like, my building was mad. They were so mad that we had school, that I made them come in and I made them work. And then, guys, the principal had they had no business making that call. The principal had zero voice in that discussion. The principal wasn't the one that made the phone call to the person that needed to know to inform the news outlets that they were open. They just had to show up just like everybody else. And so I just want to be careful as we, like find someone to blame. Like, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to, want someone to blame because it feels good when it's not your fault, but just be careful because, geez, our leadership is taking heat for a lot. And I have to tell you, I truly believe 90% of it, they didn't even get asked their opinion about what you're upset about. And that sucks for them.
And I was just about to say that because I know I talk very candidly with my principal, and he's an advocate for himself, for his building, for his students, for his teachers. And he tells me, he goes, Law, I just don't know what I can do to get teachers to realize that I was fighting against this. As I was hearing it, I was the one raising my hand saying, hey, guys, have you thought about this? Have we thought about that? He goes, so teachers don't realize that, again, you're not in as much control as you think when you get to that level. And even, I was sharing with my students, I say, even our superintendent, her hands are tied to the board.
Yeah.
She can have great ideas, but if the board says no, then it's no.
And truly, and it has to be no, because that's how the system works. The superintendent will lose their job, just like we're nervous about losing our job. That's how this works. And it's just so funny as you look at how that structure operates, and you got to be really careful around who you blame, because your principal might be there fighting tooth and nail, tears coming down their face. Please don't do this to my teacher. But the moment a decision is made, that principal becomes a messenger. It's like a marriage where if you want to go out to dinner with your friends and they're all bringing their husbands, and your husband says, I can't come, please don't make me. I have this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, and I don't have a babysitter. You have to go without me. When you show up at that dinner, you're like, oh, Steve wasn't feeling well. This, you're backing him up because you're the messenger. You make your husband look good in front of your friends, and you know that there was a decision made that you agree with, but you're there with a smile on saying, oh my gosh, guys, but he wanted to be here and he'll be here next time. He's so wonderful. I so appreciate the work that he does to make our family work. And principals are doing the same thing. They're putting on their face and they're the messengers, and it stinks, but it is what it is.
So I guess the easy follow-up question is where do you see the power being? Is it just strictly like the school board? Is it the community? Is it government? What I mean, because I'll let you answer this one, then I'll come back to my next follow-up.
I don't think there's a one answer to this question. Um, I think everybody has a different passion space that they like to believe enacts change. I know a lot of friends that have wanted to move into educational law or educational politics, and they want to go to DC and they want to sit on the steps and they want to make a change. I actually just have a different passion space. I think it's within our communities. I think that our communities are ignorant to what's going on in our schools. And I think that ignorance creates hatred. I think ignorance creates fear. I think ignorance creates distrust. And I think that while government officials and whatever are making these decisions, I think it fosters first with our communities understanding, respecting, and loving the school system and understanding at a community level as well what decisions are made by the building and what decisions are not. And if we can fix the ignorance, I think we're going to fix a lot of concern. So I'm sorry this has gone in a negative way, but I really do feel like this is
No,
an important
no,
topic.
no. This is
This is literally
perfect.
not the work I do ever. This is just my opinion.
Well, no, this particular is, our passion space is really teachers in those first 3 years
Mhm.
to really support those people and ensure that they get what they need in terms of mentorship and support to stay in the profession. And part of it, it's that definition of optimism, where optimism is not positivity. Optimism is like, this is the situation, but I'm hopeful
Mhm.
that things will get better, or that things can get better. But it's that perspective of, the community based, um people just not knowing. I guess
And I
then.
think a third year teacher, first to third, has a responsibility to do all the things we're talking about. I think sometimes we talk about education and first year teachers or early education teachers are like, well, I hope to do that, but I got to get a few years in. And the reality is that you can be educating your community, you can be understanding the decisions that can and cannot be made by your leadership staff, and you can be advocating for the people that are looking to place blame and ensuring that it's going to a safe and appropriate person.
But the best thing that I did to understand the balance of power was attend a school board meeting.
Mm. Oh.
As we can make it, the reality is when you sit there and you listen, you understand that there's a chain and there's a decision that the decisions that have to take place.
Mhm.
And you can't, and one of the things you said is that, you know, teachers are always looking for someone to blame, administrators are always looking for someone to blame. When the
Human
reality is we should stop trying to look for people to blame. One of the things I tell my kids is own it. Take everyone else out of the equation and own it. What was your part? Whether it was because of ignorance, whether it was because of laziness, whether it was because of I just didn't want to, own your part in it. Don't worry about the global, because if everyone owned their part, then we can move on from it.
Which I think is, I mean, it's human nature to look for someone to blame, but I love that concept of own it. And that's what I meant as I was discussing, teachers deserve respect. Yes, you do. But what are you doing today to ensure that you can own it and also
Mhm.
be a part of that solution? And so, a teacher that's sitting back and listening to this podcast and saying, all right, guys, you're talking about big top level stuff. What can I do? Some really tangible things is really get to know the hierarchy within your school building, within your district. Choose to ask questions with a lens of wanting to learn rather than to judge, and choose when you're sitting around your community or even when you're with your teacher friends, choose to lend some perspective and just try and educate some of the really important elements of the work that we're doing, because we got powerful jobs, guys. This is good. We got to tell people how great it is.
Yeah. And one of the things, I think we were interviewing Hal Bowman, and he was saying when he was a band director, if he wanted kids to come in from elementary or from middle school playing a certain instrument, he would get the coolest kids in the school to take a picture holding the instruments, or go with them when they went to the elementary school holding the instrument, even if they couldn't play it, because now I want to play the trombone because you see the football player played the trombone. And he said that that's what teachers have to we have to kind of create a space to where teachers are as you said, advocating for themselves, putting themselves, like, instead of complaining about what's not happening or what you can't do or what you're not allowed to do or what you're being told to do. Talk about what you get to do every day.
Mhm.
Spread that around about, I'm an advocate saying, I get to come to work every day and do the one thing that I love more than anything. I get to sit here and have conversations with little minds that spark little things within myself. I get to make a difference in a kid's life. I get to make a difference in a family's life. Those are the conversations that we need to be having with the general community. So it will shift. Respect begets respect. You have to give respect in order to get it. And if teachers are not, as you said, that's starting with self,
Mhm.
then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when we're asking for more.
Well, and similar to what we've been discussing, to add to that, within that conversation, teachers need to be thinking of their community like their audience, like their students. How do you lesson
Mm,
plan a conversation to ensure that you're getting the end result? How do you formatively assess that your message was heard, and what minor tweaks or reteaching can you do if there's a miscommunication as you're going through your passion and what your role is? And then, can you give your audience a tactical strategy, a step they can go do to be a part of the solution? So if you want them to understand that teachers are passionate, well educated, and really wanting to do better, but they have roadblocks in front of them, and you want them to understand what those roadblocks are, how can we evaluate that they got that understanding, and what steps can they do to help educators overcome those hurdles? I mean, again, these are the same practices and we know how to do them. We just need to commit to it.
We literally at my school just got done doing 2 weeks of this process because we had been planning to take our eighth graders to DC, but with new mandates, the half of the Smithsonian's closed early for renovations, and then the other half is going to like a Sunday through or a Thursday through Sunday opening, and we don't get out there till Sunday afternoon, and we leave on Thursday, or we would have. So
Yeah.
we spent 2 weeks crafting a message to kids and to parents like that ultimately came to the message of we want to celebrate your kids, but we can do it better locally than we can out there. We don't want to take the kids 25 hours in a bus to do 20% of what we could in DC. And by and large, we haven't got a terribly large amount of negative feedback because we explained to them like this is the thing. And when I was talking with kids about it, they were like, how long have you known? And I'm like, a little more than a week. And they're like, why didn't you just tell us? I'm like, because we wanted to figure out how to tell you. We
Mhm.
don't want to just be like, haha, sucks to suck, you're not going to DC. Like you definitely don't want to. Yeah, it just makes me all the term that came to mind when you were thinking about it was like, teachers got to brand themselves better.
mm.
Mm. Mm. It's
But
hard.
most teachers don't think of themselves as I should be a brand. I do. I'm the guy who has a poster of himself in his classroom.
Dang
You
right.
know,
Dang right.
I I'm going to do my best because I shared with teachers when I first came into the middle school space. I said, you have to realize that our middle school kids are looking for something to get behind. They're looking for someone to follow. I say, so by me just simply having a poster, now that strikes the kids. They were like, was this an album cover? Did you do an album and this is an album? I'm like, no, that's kind of like my thing. You either get a math lesson or a life lesson. So the kids would get all excited and it worked because it built them up to them. I'm almost like a celebrity.
Mhm.
And then when they started following me on Instagram and they're following my teacher page, and they're like, I saw you posted our kites, and so now other kids are like, oh, I saw your kite on TV. I mean, on the internet. I saw this, I saw that on Instagram. The kids get excited about it, which change and shifts the conversation in the classroom.
Yeah, you're emphasizing your expertise, you're emphasizing your passion. I mean, that is how you gain people's respect or anything else, is they get to know you and they get to know how qualified you are. And educators that are listening to this right now, I challenge you, think of 3 to 5 things. When somebody says Ray Hughart, or when someone says, your name, what are the 3 to 5 things that you want that to come to their mind? That's what your brand is. That's the whole thing.
Mm.
It's that easy. So if you have 3 to 5 things, then every post on social media, every decision that you make in the classroom, every conversation that you have should be able to be lifted by those 3 to 5 pillars, because then it's going to continue to elevate that brand. And it's how you stay authentic. It's how you ensure that you're representing yourself well. And it's easy, friends. You can all think of 3 to 5 things that you want people to think of when they have your name in their mouth, and let's make it work. Be good.
Mm.
I
All right.
love it.
So I'm glad you kind of said that, because this is the direction I wanted to go. And I'm going to qualify this. There is a book which I think every person should read. It's by a guy named Mark Manson. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, but it actually uses the
Yeah.
word. It's the title is, you know, intentionally provocative, but the basic the basic premise of it is we don't have the ability to care about everything. And especially for teachers, we can't care about everything. So what I'd like for you to kind of circle back to is, you know, you talked about teachers figuring out, you know, what's important to them and what their particular thing could be in terms of changing culture or imparting to students. So how have you, you know, yourself gotten to the point where you kind of know where you're at, and what advice would you give to teachers to figure out what's really important to them? Because obviously, like you said, we can't be known for a dozen things.
Yeah. I focused on this a lot early in my career as I was trying to kind of build beyond my classroom role. Even just in a small regard, right? Like in any sense, if you're trying to do a little bit more than just be in your classroom and you want to be a part of being an advocate, or you want to be a part of just being in education and being a part of the solution, I thought I couldn't do that without having a niche, and a really well defined niche that then everyone was going to look to me for, but then I wasn't going to necessarily have an expertise on anything outside of my niche. And I think that that was a massive mistake. I see that mistake happening all the time with educator that are trying to get into the consulting realm. They think they need to have a niche. I don't necessarily think that having a niche is a bad thing. I just think that we need to not put as much pressure onto that being our sole and only value that we can provide. I think that our niche can ebb and flow. And I think that as we look at finding a niche, like I'm going to be the educator that does PD on social and emotional learning, you're really limiting your ability to make an impact with so many different people. So I really go back to that like 3 to 5 activity. When you think of 3 to 5 things that you want people to know about you, some of those things, hopefully a lot of those things, are just characteristics, right? I want people to know that I'm transparent. I want people to know that I'm going to share my opinion. I also want people to know that I really am an advocate for elevating other people's voices. And I also want people to know that anyway, all these other things. So when I find a space I'm passionate about, I'm going to do that with transparency. I'm going to do that by bringing in other voices to the conversation. And that gives me the freedom to allow my passion space to really go from one topic to another in an authentic way to whatever audience I'm able to speak to. So for me, originally my passion space, right? My soapbox, my niche was mastery learning. And that hasn't gone away. I do professional development on mastery learning. I've built a team to do professional development on mastery learning across the country, across the globe, and we foster conversations on mastery learning all day, every day. I love it. Our books are on it. I'm game. But we haven't even talked about it once here, and that's not because it's just because that hasn't come up, and I have more to my support of education beyond my niche. And so as we're looking at educators finding that niche, it really comes down to, I believe, those 3 to 5 things and whatever is getting you going these days, whatever fuels your fire right now. And it might change in 5 years, and that's okay.
So if I'm hearing you right, because I know I definitely, when Wilkie and I got started trying to do the online thing, and I knew that I did that trying to find a niche, but for me, I was more trying to find like a shtick. Like I was going to be the guy that did this one party trick, or
Yeah.
that was basically the equivalent of it. And like how different, you know, Wilkie and I started teaching together in 13.
Mhm.
Like I'm a totally different person now with a totally different life than I had then.
100%. Me too.
And it's so funny that you mentioned characteristics and traits, because I feel like in professional development that never gets talked about.
But this goes right back to what we as teachers know. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. And so the content is secondary. If you're looking to do professional development, you need to first be a human being and you need to have pillars and morals that you're basing your decisions off of. And then when you have that, the topic is secondary and only relevant when you have the right audience. It's the same theme. I feel like we have a theme on this podcast, guys. I feel like this is working out. There's a theme.
See, and this is so it's so funny because we've had, 4 or 5 conversations with people that that we know that are friends, and we've had these whole lists, and in those 4 or 5, I've never asked one question that was actually on the list.
Oh man, see, I'm derailing us.
No, but see, this is a fun part of Wilkie and I. Like, I would, if Will would let me, I would always go in just shotgunning it and go in blind and just let it rip and see where it goes. But Wilkie advised me that some people don't
It's good
necessarily.
It's nice to have an outline.
Yeah.
If nothing else can be said, we know we can ask these questions. But usually, I think the beauty of interviewing someone is that it's the same way within your classroom. Let's go back there. You start with a leading question, and from that response, you can either move on or ask a deeper question to go deeper. And I think a lot of times we, as educators, feel like we must keep going on, even though, and I tell my kids all the time, your face tells me you have a question long before your hand goes up. I say, so when I'm calling and I'm picking and I'm pulling, I'm doing it because I see that there are questions out there, but you don't ask them. So then I start asking them for you.
Yeah.
And once I start asking them, they're like, oh yeah, okay. So some of you were curious about, I was thinking that same, okay, so let's have those conversations with our kids so that they can understand that conversations are organic. If they're real true. I don't ever like to go in there, and if I go in an interview, and I love interviewing, I do, because I feel like I just love talking, and partially maybe a little bit of narcissism, that I like to talk about myself when people ask, and I like to talk about what I do. And so I don't like it when you see them reading 1, 2, 3, 4, and the questions are not really related to one another, because that tells me that, number one, you're not really listening to me. You're not really listening to me to see, okay, do I need to go deeper? Because I know I'm not that thorough to answer that question as deeply as you would want it, but the need to move on is what we have to kind of get away from. Go deeper. I would rather go deeper within one question and have the kids, I tell the kids, when y'all start saying, that's magic to me, that gives me goosebumps everywhere. Because that tells me you got it. You're getting it, and you got it on your own. It wasn't me telling you and you like, okay, I got it. Your brain was searching for it and was trying to connect it. And I think that that's kind of what we have to do. And that's kind of what you're asking teachers to do. Do that exact same thing, to start with yourself. Let's start with ourselves. And if we get ourselves questioning ourselves in our practices more deeper, and that's not right, deeper thoughts and questions about ourselves, then we can then begin to elevate ourselves to the point to where we won't have to speak our worth will show our worth.
Right.
Before we talk about your book and the work you're doing at Teach Better, I do want to circle back to one more thing that you said, because you had mentioned earlier that, there are teachers out there who are really feeling like at any point, and I could raise my hand on this, I've talked to a lot about this, that their job could be pulled right out from under them for whatever particular reason. And since we've been talking about, advocacy for ourselves as teachers, as well as transparency, do you have any advice or any, to speak on how you balance that? I mean, because I think it is, it's a real fear. I don't know how logical it is, because I think with the shortage, principals would really have a hard time actually letting people go. But how do you balance that, advocating for yourself and being transparent with that potential fear of having your job pulled out from under you?
There's this lesson that my father always used to emphasize growing up. And it's when you were upset about something, when you were fighting for something, whether it be in a marriage, in any sort of relationship, is this a 1 or a 10 for you? And if it was a 10, it was the most important it was the most important thing. You were going to fight tooth and nail. You were never going to let this go. It is so important to you that this occurs. And if it's a 1, it's it's not really that big of a deal. You're kind of just sharing your opinion. You'd like to be heard, but it's not something you're going to die on a rock for, right? And I think we need to do the same thing when we are advocating for ourselves to, for instance, to a principal. So you can go into a principal's room or a class office and say, "Here's my opinion. This is something I'm fighting for." You really need to have the perspective for you internally. Is this a 1 or a 10? Do you want the principal to say, or do you want the principal just to hear you, to carry that perspective in the back of his mind moving forward? That's fine. Or is this a 10? Like, you are willing to risk it all because you see something happening that you just truly cannot live for.
Mm.
Now, as you decide that, the flip side is anytime you enter into a conversation, the most productive way to have a conversation is to ask questions because you are eager to learn, not ask questions because you are fueled by anger or passion. I am terrible at this. When I'm upset about something, I can't maintain any sort of restraint. You see it on my face. I shake, my chest gets tight. I mean, I'm terrible at this, but it's truly something that I'm trying to work on internally, and something that I assume many of us can continue to work on. Anytime you have a concern and you want to advocate for yourself, you have to walk in knowing what you want to get to, but asking those questions to understand. Assume the best, plan for the worst, right? Assume that your principal is already on your side. Assume that your principal has made every decision with the information that they have accessible to them, and you're just going in to learn. Maybe it's going to be to learn that they didn't have all the information they needed. Maybe it's to go in and learn that you didn't have all the information you needed. But either way, go in with that perspective. And then depending on how much you push is either if it's a 1 or a 10, maybe it's an 8, maybe it's a 6, right? These are all things to consider. But with that all being said, with those like 2 things in mind, if it's a 10 for you, I promise there'll be another teaching job out there for you. I do. And honestly, if you're looking for a teaching job right now and you can't find one, you should call me, because I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people looking for good teachers. So if it's a 10 and you're fighting and you're advocating and you actually find yourself losing your job because of it, build a network. We'll get you a job. If it's really a 10, you might be willing to risk it. If it's not a 10, then you find your space in between.
Right. And that's such a good thing to think about. Kyle and I started talking, I think, last year during the COVID, during 2020, actually, saying that teachers have to realize that we are independent contractors. We sign a contract. I know here in Houston, in our district, our contract is 1 year. You're signing up for 1 year saying that for this year, I'm going to give this to you. You can learn a lot about a relationship in 1 year.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot about a school. And, I used to be critical. Don't jump schools. I mean, since I've been in teaching for 15 years, I've only been at 3 schools. One, the very first school I taught at, which I only taught for a year because I was a paraprofessional. Spent 12 years at 11 years at an intermediate school at one campus, and now for the last 4 years I've been at one campus. So, but I do realize that if I was not getting what I needed, if I was not getting everything that I needed from those building principals, and I can say honestly, I've been extremely blessed to have had great administrators. From Mr. Tom Caldwell to Dr. Kristen Kraft to Christy Van Wassenhove to, now Marcus Pruitt. These administrators embody what education is to me. So I don't mind serving under them. I would follow them as much as I could to do what I need to do because they're amazing. And Christy Van Wassenhove is one who told me about when I came out of the classroom to be an instructional specialist. She said, "Don't be afraid, just know that your classroom is getting bigger." Mm-hmm. And when she told me that, it gave me a lot of perspective. And I wrote this down when you were talking about, it's the same thing at different levels. Your classroom is just getting bigger. Your audiences are changing. And so I think that when you think about it as I have the freedom to stick this out a year, and if I'm not satisfied, try somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's okay to do that. as educators. I know we want educate. What I don't want to see is a teacher to stay in one place and then end up leaving the craft altogether because of one bad experience.
Mhm.
You can't base it off of one bad experience.
Yeah, I think there is and has been a narrative that if you move schools frequently, then somebody in an interview is going to look at your resume and say, "Oh, they must be a bad educator because they only stayed at schools for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever." I'm not saying that that narrative is incorrect, but I am going to tell you that that narrative immediately goes away when they call that principal and your principal says, "God, yeah, Ray worked here for 2 years and she left and we miss her, but she worked her butt off when she was here and I'd hire her again in a minute." It's because it might not look great that you move schools every 1 to 2 years. But if you are creating advocates, if you have reasons why you left, if you tried and communicated and you gave your all and it just wasn't the right fit, which happens in relationships all the time, then that's okay. So I would challenge educators. I think we are fearful to change our jobs, fearful to change our roles. I too felt that same way. And I think the reality is, go back to what we were talking about. You need to do what's good for you. You need to do what serves your purpose. And there always is other jobs. And obviously there's pros and cons to all that. So if you are unhappy right now, I would encourage you to not stay unhappy and instead find a way to be happier. And choosing to move schools may be that option for you, or it might be something else. But if it is, and you're struggling to find a job, reach out to your network, reach out to me, reach out to you guys. We all know people that need jobs, and like, again, pros and cons, but it's not a one size fits all. People don't stay in the profession, any profession, for many years without changing. I think people stay in education a long time without changing. So, I don't know. It's all perspective, I guess.
Mhm. I love that. All right, to be respectful of your Saturday, and I know Will's got a big tour of a property which he's excited about. So could you just, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about your books that you have written, as well as what Teach Better has got going on, so they know where they can continue to dive a little bit deeper into this and learn more from you.
Oh gosh, I could talk about that forever. Yeah, so I have published a few books. I encourage you all to go check them out. They're very, very different. One was published in 2019 with a few of my best friends that we just kind of got to go through and talk about some great things that are happening in education and how we can do them just a little bit better. The perspective of the Teach Better team has always been that we're a little bit better today than we were yesterday, and a little bit better tomorrow than we were today. And that book really was the beginning of hopefully fostering that conversation with educators. A year later, I also published a book called Teachers Deserve It with Adam Welcome. And that was kind of a secondary book to a very popular book called Kids Deserve It. In short, Kids Deserve It is a really, really inspirational book that talks about all the things that we have to do because kids deserve the best. And Teachers Deserve It has a whole long story of how it came about. But long story short, we essentially summed it up to say yes, but not at the expense of teachers. And how can teachers begin to control the narrative in a profession that they feel handcuffed to that narrative? And so it really, hopefully, was crafted to be a book to empower educators to see the power that they do actually possess, and how some of those steps are so minuscule and everyone can do them every single day if we so choose to prioritize that. So it's a really, really fun book that we were able to write, and I'm thankful that it's available. And I think it seemed very timely in 2020. Educators were feeling like they didn't have a lot of power, and I was really thrilled to see so many schools do book studies and really embrace, principal leaderships really embrace giving this to the teachers and saying, no, 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 you do deserve all these things, and as a school we're going to commit ourselves to ensuring that you get them. I think that's a really empowering message for leadership to provide their staff. And it's a fun little book to read. It's a quick read, really, really fun stories, very personal stories with Adam and I. And we got into education very differently. He's like an all-star in California principal. If you don't know Adam Welcome, he's got his whole little like personality over there. I love Adam. He's a great friend. And I'm a simple Midwest girl. And, it was fun to be able to blend those two perspectives. So as far as Teach Better, though, Teach Better is my love, my passion. It really is. an incredible organization. It fosters a global community, and it does two things. One is that we provide professional development, and the other is that we just like to be a safe space to discuss all things education, and really ensure that we won't necessarily promise that we have the answer at all, but we love to help people connect dots and start the brainstorming so that they can continue to seek the right answers for their students and their community. So if you head to teachbetter.com, you're going to see blogs published every single day. We publish at least one blog every single day, including weekends at teachbetter.com. We have a super active podcast network. We have over 40 podcasts that we've vetted and talked to and endorse, and they're all doing work in different spaces. We have an administrative mastermind that happens multiple times a week. We have a morning show for educators that happens every single morning at 7 a.m. Eastern that we foster. And we also have a conference that's coming up. That's October 14th and 15th. This will be a great time to bring our community together in Akron, Ohio. And then we also, here in a few weeks, we have a 12-hour live. It literally is going to be 12 hours of professional development that we're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. We're bringing in different voices, different faces every half an hour, different themes every half an hour. And the goal, again, is to just continue to be a space to foster dialogue. So I encourage you all to go check out Teach Better. I like to describe Teach Better as you're kind of in like a big ballroom, and there's all these doors around you, and they're all open. So you just get to decide which one you walk into and go from there, explore from there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So the conference on the October 14th, 15th, that's face-to-face.
It is. It's in Akron, Ohio. We are slowly but surely releasing our featured speakers, and we also have proposals opening on the 1st. So anybody listening, if you want to be added to our featured speaker lineup, mark your calendars for March 1st and make sure you submit a session, because we would love to have you. It's going to be a great
Akron, Ohio, the home of LeBron James.
It is. It'll be fun.
I guess you probably have to fly into Columbus, right?
I typically fly into Cleveland. You can actually also fly into Akron. Akron has an active airport. So I don't know if I'm flying into Akron or if I'm flying into Cleveland, but either way, it's about an hour from Cleveland.
Oh, that's right. No, I'm thinking Columbus is Ohio State. Cleveland is Akron. I'm a geography teacher, and I'm terrible at geography.
I am just continuously learning Ohio. It's not a state that I'm familiar with, but I am very excited. We're having the event at Akron STEM Middle School, which used to be the Innovation Museum in their community, and it is, holy moly, it is a venue. Like, it is just I love that it's in a school, but it's a really creatively built school. I just cannot wait to bring our community into these different learning opportunities that you wouldn't get in like a ballroom conference. I mean, this is going to be like a wacky event. I can't wait.
Wow. You got me excited about it. Yeah.
Well, good.
That seems good about it. Like, no, I'm thinking about March 1st. I'm thinking about the proposal deadline, because I'm like, that will, I think there's something about being in this great space when you're doing PD. I do PDs for a daycare on relationship building. And you would think that, well, you teach middle school, how are you teaching them how to build relationships with infants? And I say, but because relationships are relationships. Mm-hmm. That is the one thing that the earlier you learn how to foster good relationships, the better your whole life will be. Mm-hmm. Because it's that one thread that weaves through every single thing that you do. And so that's my approach when I'm dealing with them and when I'm teaching in their spaces, designed for little kids with all the color and all the pops. It's like you get an opportunity to do something different and to be more animated, and it frees you.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you submit a session. Proposals are open March 1st all the way through the end of April. So for those of you listening, there's 2 months. Submit a session. There's all different kinds of sessions. You can prepare in advance or slowly work through the submission because you got some time. And I'm so excited to see presenters. We'll also have a podcaster row. It's happening in a really cool space. I think it's my favorite room in that entire Innovation Museum that we're hosting this conference in. But we'll have a podcaster row with podcasters everywhere doing interviews. So if you're attending as a guest or attending as a presenter, you can also have the opportunity to be featured on different podcasts. As podcasters yourself, gentlemen, we'd love to have you. So I think it's just going to be a great creative space. Educators need a space to not only learn, but foster creativity. And I think this building really aligns with our goal of wanting educators to feel connected and supported and extra inspired. It'll be a good time. So.
All right, Will, any other follow-up questions? Anything you'd like to pick Ray's brain on before we get her off on her
They're like, no,
Saturday
she's been
adventures?
talking so long. Get her off. Just kidding.
No,
No,
I mean, because
honestly,
I would literally
it's
sit here and talk all day long because
yeah.
again, education is, I tell my kids, I've invested, over 15 years of my life to this craft.
Mm.
That is all of my adult life, I've been focused on educating. All of my adult life. Even when I was in college, I worked as a QMRP for a vocational training for people with dual diagnosis. And so that was even an educational space, just not in a formal classroom. You're taking people with mental disability, emotional disability, and teaching them how to work in a space. You're following them. You're teaching them how to be helpful, how to do home life, how to wash dishes and cook dinner, like how to go shopping, like all these things. So I've been in the education space my whole life, so I can talk about this every day, all day, without feeling like I'm wearing myself down, because I feel like the more you talk about something, the more you learn about it. Because you open yourself up to people like yourself and what you're doing over Teach Better, and how that can inform what I do on my campus. And I think that if our listeners will take anything from this, I didn't think it went off the rails. I think it went exactly where we're supposed to go, because I asked my students the other day, I say, if I put in GPS right now in my phone and I ask my phone to take me to the Galleria, what is the very first thing they're going to ask me? And the kids were like kind of curious. They were like, first thing they're going to ask you is, what's your starting point?
Mm.
And I feel like our conversation today was our GPS starting point, that this is where we are. We know where we're trying to go, but this is the reality of where we are. So whatever twists, turns, bridges, obstacles, alternative routes we have to take, we know we're going to get to our destination, but we had to start here. Mm. And so I thank you for the work that you're doing, and for being a voice for teachers, and for helping, this craft get better and better each year.
I appreciate it. Always fun chatting with you guys. So I could talk for hours on this as well. And I appreciate the dialogue. This is why we've been connected for so long. I love what you guys are doing. I love your community that you foster, and it's so fun to be able to talk shop.